So I had to write a bio recently for my new website, and it made me realise when I added it up, I've actually worked now in more than 50 different workplaces. They range from really small family-type businesses, largely this end, to some really big FTSE 100 household names and some government organisations. Kind of quite a broad mix there, but the kind of thing that's always a theme across the work I do is it's always in the change and transformation space. I'm always trying to help people do something different from what they've been doing before. I'm under lots of NDAs. I could get away with it, but I'm just being a little bit careful because of the recording. So the kind of stuff I've been doing is post-merger integration and rebranding efforts, agile transformations, often in IT, but also increasingly outside of IT as well, which is really exciting. I was here when the offshoring phase started, and then I was here when the onshoring back again phase started. Lots of IT work. So, well, there we go already. Slow. So I'm here today to call time on transformation. So I think we're not getting our transformation work right. So what am I talking about? Although I work in transformation, this is my day job, I think we make life so much harder for ourselves on so many occasions with the way that we structure the way we deliver change. So I'm talking about traditional transformation programs. So the ones with the big budget, the huge expectations, and when we're trying to tackle just so much in one go. So the idea that you can underinvest for years and then with a single program you can catch right back up to where you needed to be. I think that concept has really had its time. And instead of trying to fix things in one big go, we need to be really talking about something else, about sustaining change month after month, year after year, about how we stay ahead, how we stay relevant, about solving the complex issues we face now and dealing with how we need to work today. So, do change programs and transformation programs actually work? Well, the whole point of them is to deliver large-scale change. And how good are they at really delivering their promises? I did some very scientific research on Google, and what it came up with was that the standard failure rate is actually 70%. Has anyone heard that 70% number before for failing? Yeah, a few nods. So when you flip that around, the problem is that means there's only a 30% success rate. So if you had a 30% chance of success at winning the lottery at the weekend, that's pretty good. I'd be all right with that, I'll take that. If it's a 30% chance of success at making it to work safely if you're cycling in, that's not so good. And if you were that person taking the leap of faith, if you've only got a 30% chance that your parachute's going to open, that's really not what you're looking for. So the odds for transformation programs aren't great when you look at it that way, but we keep on doing them. And so I was asking myself, why is that? What are the things that go wrong? So we've got a classic to start with, the overpromise and then under-deliver scenario. Classic, but still true, unfortunately. One example I remember was replatforming a supermarket's website. It was a really big piece of work. We were schmoozed by a Big Four consulting firm. They promised their product could do everything we could possibly need. That was all great. Then the delivery team turned up and told us none of that had actually been tested at scale in a real environment. It was all scenarios and assumptions. Not so good. By the time we realised there was a problem, we'd committed the launch date to the shareholders and to the press. We had a whole delivery team working night and day to try and get this thing live. And it was just not looking good. So our requirements were going up all the time. The shippable functionality was not going up at the same pace. We were still hopeful until we actually started testing the thing. And from that point on, the program was just no fun whatsoever. So I think a lot of those classic transformation programs do fall into those waterfall traps, the idea that you can take things on trust, you can plan your way out of everything. And that's just not what we see when we're actually on the ground delivering. The other thing that I think people forget is that changing things, changing ways of working upsets people or can upset people. And you're on such a hiding to nothing if you don't get people behind your transformation goals. You ignore the people aspect at your peril. So if you get an external team in to deliver the transformation program, people are put out because it's being done to them instead of done with them. So it doesn't work. If you use internal resources to deliver the transformation program, then people get sidetracked by their day job, by all their BAU targets, the BAU work. So that doesn't really work either. And then when the transformation program starts to get squeezed, usually towards the end, it's often the people aspects that are the first things to get cut, the time for training, the time for engagement. So that means people don't know what you want them to do. And even if they do know what you want them to do, they have not bought into it at all. So not going so well. And yet we still think we can beat the odds. We still start these programs week in, week out, year in, year out. So why is that? Maybe we're overly confident in our own ability to beat those odds. Psychologists asked a group of US drivers to rate their driving ability. And 93% of the sample group thought they were above average with their driving skills. Now, my maths is not good, but I know you can't have 93% of a sample group above average and have those people be right. So we do have a bias towards thinking we can do more than we often can. I think also people fall into the trap of hoping that planning very well and getting to lots of detail will help them preempt any risk or issue. But you can't plan a 3 or a 4 year program and think of everything. As soon as you actually start delivering, new things will come up all the time, and it just doesn't align with how things play out in the real world. So if transformation programs fail more than they succeed, do we still need to transform at all? What's the point? Well, I think you may well have noticed that there's a whole lot of technical changes going on around us. We've got the political context that we're working in. There's so much going on. I think making a case for no transformation would just feel a little bit ludicrous at this point. So my answer is that we definitely do still need to change. We need to handle the pace of change, find ways to respond. But those traditional transformation programs, my argument is that they've had their day. Good people cannot outperform bad systems. So we need to create an environment that makes it easier for people to be successful. Sounds easy, doesn't it? But it's a lot easier to spot the problems than it is to find a workable solution, which I think a lot of you will have experienced in the work that you do. So I've been researching this area for a few years now and experimenting with the clients that I work with. I've read a lot of books written by some very, very smart people, much smarter than me. I've watched a lot of TED Talks. I've learned from people at work or in meetups like this or in chats in the pub, which is my preferred route. The key thing I learned is that we know now so much more about how to get the best from people and how to set up systems at work, but we really, really struggle to make that real, to consistently set up those systems, create those environments. We get it, we can prove it works, but we don't yet know how to deliver that at scale so that we create those environments to be successful. There are just so many fantastic stories of people in the military, in sports, in psychology, in education, in business, in IT with the Agile story, where people are really changing the norms and getting awesome results. But these early adapters aren't yet really fully landing it in the mainstream. There's still a lot of work to be done to help people take these ideas and really get them out there and really land them. The one big thing I found the one big thing to understand is there is no one big answer with this. It's lots of elements and ideas from different fields that contribute to something that could really work much better. There's no magic single bullet. So I'm here to advocate that we no longer need transformation programs, but we need to switch on the people in our organisations to get them to focus on solving the toughest challenges we face. And collectively, we can really create value, cut through waste, pivot when we need to, explore new opportunities, inspire the team, and then unleash them in the right direction. The magic really comes from putting the ideas into action to do what we know, and to do it consistently on the good days and on the difficult days. So it's all about creating new habits and new combinations that build up into something that feels different. So I've identified 4 steps that I'd like to take you through that in this sequence start to make things feel really quite different. I'm ahead for the first time. Right, so step 1, create a big, hairy, audacious goal. So anyone who's read the Jim Collins piece will know BHAG's, Big, Hairy, Audacious Goals. Why do we need goals? We need them to engage hearts and minds. We need them to spark the imagination, to create passion in the people who are working with us. The goals should be exciting, a bit scary, and definitely beyond our current comfort zone. So think JFK's putting a man on the moon and returning him to Earth safely, or athletes looking at trying to achieve an Olympic gold medal. They're big, hairy, audacious goals. They are things that people will really get behind. And the point of these is to get everybody going in the same direction, to cut through the organisational silos, to get rid of the competing objectives to really simplify decision making. Step 2, start to practice radical transparency. Back in the day, knowledge was power. People were very much, the more knowledge you had, the more power you had, and you would hoard it very closely. These days, I can find out an awful lot in 5 minutes on Google. So it's not about access to information. It's now about what I do with it, what I know, and what I can do with it. So for knowledge workers to contribute to achieving a big, hairy, audacious goal, they really need to understand the realities of the organisation and their market so they can make great decisions. So they need to understand the competitor position, the market trends, changing priorities within the organisation. We need people to know enough to be able to join the dots in new and different ways. And you can't assume you can just tell them what you think they need to know. That will really limit where they can take the ideas. So step 3 is to create an idea meritocracy. No single individual now can possibly manage all of the complexity, the pace of change, and be on top of all of the emerging trends. The idea of a rock star CEO figure who has all the answers and presides over a team who have nothing to contribute is really now, I would say, just ridiculous. That's just not how it's working. We need to understand that great ideas can come from any part of the organisation, any level, any team. It's not an innovation team tucked away or the senior leadership team. It's really opening it up. And the work that needs to happen here is that we find a way to capture those ideas and work out which ones we should act upon and which ones not so much. Step 4, Scrum. So this is where the Agile part comes in. Of course, there are a huge number of parallels between transformation programs and the old waterfall IT programs that Agile was created to resolve. So it's a very natural partner, I think, in this transformation space. Agile principles and practices have a lot to offer with transformation. So there's concepts like ruthless prioritization, managing levels of work in progress, self-organizing teams, stop starting, start finishing, that really are key to landing changing ways of working, changing ways of doing things. So is focusing on value. If we cut the waste from our organisations, we can then create capacity so that people can focus on doing the work that leads to a big, hairy, audacious goal. There's a lot of people doing things that aren't adding a huge amount of value, that if we can start cutting through that, we can do so much more. There are some challenges that accompany these steps. So the first one is to embrace everyday excellence. Before the Industrial Revolution, we were a nation of artisan craftsmen. When factories took over, people became just another part of the factory line. But simple factory line processes are just not going to be able to handle the complex problems we deal with now. So hence the rise of the knowledge worker or the return of the artisan worker. When we were part of the factory line, we just did the work that was placed in front of us. It was a very simple, did the work, passed it on. Very, very simple process. But now we've got new ways of working and new challenges. So I can't think the number of times it's got to 5 o'clock and I've been in a shed load of meetings. I've answered God knows how many emails. I've been running around like a headless chicken all day, but I have done nothing yet of my to-do list, nothing that really is important and looking ahead and adding value. I've been reactive. And I don't think it's just me. I think that's pretty normal. So it's really important as we take on this artisan role that we are more deliberate about how we spend our time and where we put our energy and start to really cut through some of that busy work to make sure we're focused on the important. It's a fantastic opportunity for people to get into this more interesting and fulfilling work, but it also requires responsibilities. Challenge 2, one of these, is to stop playing safe and really understanding that average is no longer good enough. So imagine you've got a deadline in a month and you've got to deliver a big strategy paper or a big new idea about how something's going to work. You think, I've got a month. Awesome, that's loads of time. And then you might request a few bits of information so you can do your paper, but then you get sidetracked. Then you end up going to the meetings, you end up dealing with, say, team issues, you've got your one-to-ones, and then something goes wrong, someone in your team calls in sick, there's some supplier issues or whatever else. Your mind is distracted into those things. Before you know it, the paper is due the next day, and you spend a couple of hours doing the best you can, cobbling it together, winging it on the day, and then you're producing something that honestly is going to be pretty average. You had good intentions, you've not meant to be sidetracked, but that's how it works when we're busy and everyone wants a piece and we're always on. So we've got to really think about moving beyond that kind of working and being so reactive. I think the old adage, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got, is actually just wishful thinking now. if you're doing what you've always done, you're not getting what you've always got, you're getting far less, and you're actually likely to be going backwards. So we've got to change that mindset. Challenge number 3, sort out your management practices. So this, guess what, is just another example where we know what we should be doing a lot of the time, but it's still really hard to get it done. So I think a lot of managers understand that management styles have to evolve at the moment to accommodate more creativity, more innovation, and the knowledge workers and millennials and all the things that are changing. And on a good day, I think a lot of people manage to get into that space. It's on the bad days or when things fail or we've tried an experiment and it hasn't worked and they revert back to those old command and control style management practices that we get into real trouble, because every time you break that trust, every time that you revert, you damage the relationship, you damage the trust. You make it easier and safer for someone to give you the safe option rather than doing something exceptional or risky. So we really need to look at how we can move beyond that. So they're the 4 steps and the 3 challenges. It's a framework that I'm experimenting with at different organisations. It's important to experiment and see what works. This is just high level, it's one answer of many, but deliberately trying to move beyond the obvious, I think, is really important, or the known is really important. So my suggestion to you guys today is, could you try out some of the ideas in the work that you're doing? I presume as we're at Agile Roundabout, you will know Agile methods, Agile principles, you're doing that. Could you share that with people outside of your teams? Could you share that with some business teams, help them to see if that could work for them? Could you help the business understand, could you translate Agile for the business so you're not using jargon, you're using words that they'll understand and helping them see how it could solve their business problems? Do you have a big, hairy, audacious goal in your area? Could you share more information with your teams? Could you get better at sourcing ideas from the whole teams, from the quiet people, from the loud people? Could you experiment a bit with that? So at the start of this presentation, I talked about some principles that I think have had their day. I have some principles that I try and look to that have underpinned what I've talked about in the presentation, so I thought I'd just close by sharing those with you. So the first one, catalyst, is to be a catalyst. Don't wait for permission to change things, to tackle the problems you see around you. You can start change. You don't need a big title to be a leader. Anyone can just grab the ball, seize the day, and crack on. So I would encourage you to think about that. The nexus piece is don't be an island. Engage with the people around you. Work together to build better systems, better ways of working, and build a workplace that you want to be part of. And then Kairos. Kairos is the idea of a perfect moment to do something rather than chronos or chronological time. And that is seize the day. If not now, when would you do these things? When would you make a change? So as I close and ask for any questions, I would just ask, my question to you is what could you take something today? Could you use it? Could you take what you're doing another level, share it with more people?